Well, Alicia, let me start with what transpired in Botswana. Yeah. You are aware that it was a funeral of a stalwart, Mbeki and Ketumile Masire, a man who worked with many leaders on the continent, starting with the region to establish SADC as we know it today, and also working with people like Julius Nyerere, Haile Selassie, Kwame Nkrumah to strengthen the then Organization of African Unity. It is for that reason the Secretary General of the former OAU, which is now an AU, Dr. Salim Ahmed Salim was there. And clearly he was there to give support to the family, because he said that Masire was his close friend, the only person who was still alive that was very close to him. And you could see towards the end of his speech, he was really touched when he spoke about how he is now on his own, you know, in terms of his peers. And then I think what I suspect is that at the funeral, there was a time where they had time to speak to with former President Thabo Mbeki, and it is perhaps during that discussions issues were raised around the future of the liberation organizations in the SADC region, but also on the continent. And yesterday at the rally in Masivingo in Zimbabwe, he disclosed that in their discussions, they looked at what's happening within the liberation organizations, and there are concerns that they are losing support, and the legacy of such organizations that played a prominent role to liberate the continent and also to liberate SADC in particular. Something needs to happen to ensure that the legacy is maintained, and to hand over these organizations to young people or the generation after people like President Mugabe, people who are much younger, so that they don't die. And he said they will have this meeting, they are going to meet to discuss a way forward.
But you know, when you mentioned Mugabe handing over power to youngsters, we all know that that might not come into fruition. But I mean, will this not be seen as a move by Mugabe to try and cling on to power then?
Many people will have different interpretations. From my side, I saw it as perhaps a move or an acceptance from the part of President Mugabe that indeed he's too old now. I mean, when he was supposed to speak at the funeral, they had to move a podium where the podium was, because to go to the podium, he was supposed to climb 3 steps. There was no way he would have done that. They had to dismantle the podium. It was so chaotic in front of international guests, people like former President Noyoma, former President Gebuza, former President Mugabe, Salim Ahmed Salim, and former President Thabo Mbeki, the Deputy President of the Republic, in front of South African Cyril Ramaphosa, in front of Ian Khama, and many, many people. You could see that people were at pains, you know, the body language, you know, people shrinking, that this is, yeah.
But Mugabe doesn't even want to entertain any succession debate, Sophie. And then, I mean, how are we supposed to see him as a credible leader to chair such discussions when he himself cannot practice what he's preaching?
I think this meeting is going to lead to where he will understand that indeed it's time to bring in young people to lead, particularly in the SADC region. That's my view, and I trust that people like President Thabo Mbeki, the former president, as they talk about this issue, they will indicate the fact that young people must now take a lead, even though President Mugabe hasn't said anything, and we know that the former president of South Africa, Thabo Mbeki, has on many occasions indicated that the people of Zimbabwe themselves must lead in terms of what needs to happen in Zimbabwe. But I think behind the scenes, you know, to see him at his age now, where he is really battling sometimes, I think it's time for senior people to perhaps talk to him nicely. And I think if he indicates that they must ensure that the legacy of these organizations
lives on,
lives on, and young people must do that. I think it's an indication that perhaps he's giving us an indication that, yeah, I'm a bit tired.
We can only wonder and assume that that's the direction that it's going to go. But what reason, Sophie, could be attributed to the liberation movements across the continent losing that support, particularly from the youth?
You had the Secretary General of the ANC yesterday giving a critical analysis of what's happening within the ANC. He said it's what they do. All over the continent. The problem is when you are in power, the sins of the incumbent, what do you do? Or what are you doing will come back to haunt you. We know in a situation like ours in South Africa, there are complaints about the Gupta family, there are complaints about corruptions, there are complaints about how people are conducting themselves. If these allegations are not investigated, properly tested, and a clear answer is there, people will be despondent and they will look for alternative. And we saw what happened during the local government elections in 2016. 2016. Yeah. Clearly people saying, okay, let's give perhaps other people a chance. And today we have a coalition in Johannesburg, we have a coalition in Pretoria, we have a coalition in Port Elizabeth. Even though the coalition, by its nature, they are not sustainable, and at times there are challenges. But it's because people feel that people that they gave power to, sometimes they don't do what they promised people. So I think that is the main problem.
But Sophie, I mean, with the current leaders, when you look at those liberation movements, when you look at them, these are seasoned rulers. These are people that have been with those liberation movements right from the beginning. And would you say that them adhering or keeping to those values of saying we're still in the mode to liberate the struggle, we're not willing to relinquish power then?
I think the problem with the liberation organizations is that yes, they do have political power, but they don't have economic power. And they feel that, aluta continua, in a sense that it's not a total liberation. If you have political power, but you don't have economic power, it's not liberation. And now I think they feel guilty that perhaps they should have done much better in terms of changing the lives of people on the continent. And some will still feel guilty that it's a mission that we couldn't complete, and they would still want to see that happening. But unfortunately, at times, it's about personal interest, and they tend to lead to a situation where people don't really do what they are supposed to do.
But then, Sophie, I mean, I know we've debated this before on trying to put more pressure on the AU to try and intervene when it comes to these issues of leadership, because, I mean, these factions don't just arise from anything. It's leaders clinging on to power. It's people not wanting to do certain things as a group. They want to do things individually. So let's talk about that. I mean, how much is it going to take for the AU to try and intervene? We know about the whole argument of each country having its own sovereignty, so you can't go and oppose certain rules to them. But I mean, what can we do if they don't intervene?
Well, when the OAU was turned into AU, there was hope, and it then seems like things would change. But unfortunately, we are back there when you look at what's happening in the DRC. And let's hope that the proposed reforms in terms of the document that was put together by different experts from the continent, including Tito Mboweni, the team being led by the Rwandan President Paul Kagame, will speak to those issues. And as the AU summit gets underway this coming Monday in Addis Ababa, these are some of the issues that they will grapple with. It can't be business as usual. Absolutely. In the same way they are proposing a different way to elect or to choose the AU Commission chair.
True.
They must also look at how you ensure that there's smooth transition of power, but also you ensure that there are term limits. People don't stay in power for too long, and the population gets restless, and there's now some chaotic situation and people are now looking after themselves, not really looking after the nation.
Sophie, thank you so much for joining us. Hopefully we'll wait for all those deliberations from the African Union Summit. Will you be there?
Well, Lehana Tsotetsi will be there. He will definitely send us reports and cover the story. Amos Pahofo Radio will be there. Definitely, the South African public will definitely know what's happening at the AU Summit.
All right, Sophie, thank you so much. That is our foreign editor, Sophie Mokoena, talking to us about the proposed meeting between former President Thabo Mbeki and, of course, Robert Mugabe on issues as to why liberation movements are actually losing their support within the continent. Let's now cross